Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this free webinar. Our panel of road safety engineers, specialists and practitioners are ready to discuss the challenges, opportunities and initiatives faced by local government in securing positive road safety outcomes in Australia. The current operating environment for road safety will be covered, while coping mechanisms for seizing demands, freight corridors and the implementation of the safe system approach will be covered. The webinar would ordinarily be offered to current subscription holders, so if you enjoy the experience, please visit our website to find out what's available. My name is Rosemary Patterson. I'll be your co-moderator tech support with Angela Wrights in the same role. The webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, where you'll be invited to make observations, pose questions to the panel and share your experiences working in the safety field. We'll be recording this session today, so you'll be able to access the recording later. You can pose questions to the panel by typing them into the chat box. If you experience any technical glitches, please use the raise your hand function. Our objectives for today are to create a discussion of the challenges faced by local government in securing positive road safety outcomes in Australia, gain an insight into the current operating environment and talk about successful initiatives, and to identify opportunities and challenge practitioners regarding them. Please, we ask that you share your observations, experiences and questions throughout the webinar. Our facilitator today is Paul Helia. Welcome, Paul.
Good afternoon, Rosemary. Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you may be. I understand we have quite a wide-flung audience today, including some people from New Zealand. So welcome to everybody and hope we enjoy the webinar today.
Awesome.
Great pleasure to introduce the panellists. First and foremost from the ARB group, David McTiernan, who's in our Sydney office. David, welcome this afternoon.
Thanks, Paul.
Just a little bit about your role at ARB, please.
Yeah, well, I've had 16 years in local government around New South Wales and nearly 10 years here at ARB as the team leader for road safety and safe systems, looking after a wide variety of projects, but primarily road safety based, and particularly since the safe systems principles have come in. Excellent.
Thanks, David. Welcome. Off to Melbourne now, and Blair Turner, our National Technical Leader in Safer Road Infrastructure. Hello, Blair. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody.
And recovering from a week's leave, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Sunny Queensland for a week, so first day back in the office today, but obviously enjoying being involved in this webinar.
Excellent. Thanks, Blair. Delighted to say we have a number of panellists from local government from around Australia. Firstly, Mick Savage. Mick's the Manager of Roads and Transport Directorate with the Institute of Public Works Engineers. Mick's in Sydney, I think. How's things today in Sydney, Mick?
Well, not too bad, Paul, and good to be involved in this webinar.
Thanks, Mick. And you're going to give us a real overview of local government issues and pressures in road safety?
I will certainly do that from an asset manager's point of view and from a road safety point of view.
Fantastic. Looking forward to hearing from you, Mick. And passing on to Doug. Doug's in Mornington in Victoria. Hi, Doug. What's your current role within Mornington Peninsula Shire?
Good afternoon, Paul. Yeah, I'm a traffic and road safety strategist. In more recent times, I've been a traffic engineer here previously, and yeah, very keen to share our initiatives with the rest of Australia in terms of mainly municipalities and what we've been up to in the road safety arena.
Okay, fantastic. Last, by no means least, we're waiting very patiently, Adam Malarchik, who's at Central Coast. Adam, good afternoon to you, and if you could just give us a bit of an idea of your role and your focus today.
Thanks, Paul, and hi to everyone. I'm the Team Coordinator Engineering Assessments at the Central Coast Council of New South Wales. I'm involved with more the planning side of things, new developments, new subdivisions, and involved from the strategic planning right through to delivery of these new communities that people are living.
Okay, so we'll be hearing more from Adam a bit later about the pressures of a growing network. So there's our panellists. Hope you agree, a fantastic group assembled to run through some problems, and my role is just to keep things moving along as we go on and to receive your questions. First and foremost, I thought we better put some road safety in context. We'll start off a little bit at a global level, and if I may, I'll pass over to Blair. Blair's just going to give us a bit of an insight on where things are standing. We're in Australia at the moment. Over to you, Blair.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And certainly it's a bit of a grim picture internationally, and we term it a global epidemic in terms of road safety outcomes, with about 1.25 million people killed every year on the world's roads. And that doesn't even account for those who are seriously injured and perhaps lose their livelihoods or are permanently disabled for the rest of their lives. So quite a massive problem, and expected to grow a little bit worse over the coming decades as well. Probably already aware it's the leading cause of death here in Australia, but also globally for those in that 15 to 29-year-old age group, and the second leading cause of death for the 15 to 49-year-old group. So those, I guess, economically productive members of society most at risk. And so in recognition of this problem, we do have a decade of action that's been proclaimed by the UN, United Nations, and that runs from 2011 to 2020. And in more recent times, we've established some new sustainable development goals that actually include reference to transport and specifically to road safety. And just late last year, there was a conference in Brazil, in the Brasilia Declaration. The resolution there was to try and halve deaths by 2020. So a very, very ambitious target to try and tackle what is recognised as now a global. There's certainly some.
It's going to be a busy time.
It's going to be a very busy time. There's a lot to do, and obviously a lot needed to be done in our region, Asia, globally, but particularly here in Australia as well, that as we'll see soon, we're not actually performing as well as we might. And particularly comparing ourselves to others globally, if you look at the best performers, we know that if we performed at the same level as them, we'd probably have around half of the deaths of what we do. So we'd be saving around 600 more lives a year if we performed as well as our peers in the OECD group particularly. So, but look, we are doing things here. Globally, we've been helping the world with the World Road Association Road Safety Manual. And that's providing information around what can be done in terms of management of road safety, and particularly road safety in the infrastructure sphere. And we are embracing what we'll talk about a fair bit today, and that is this towards zero or safe system approach. And that's really the leading vision, if you like, in terms of road safety around the world. And those who have adopted this approach are certainly making some great strides towards improving safety and hopefully meeting those targets.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Blair, it's an excellent summary of a busy time for it, and the time where we've really got to act. And I'll hand over to David, if he could just zoom in a little bit on Australia for us, David, and where things are going nationally.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I guess nationally, and including New Zealand in this perspective as well, because we do have some people from New Zealand attending. You can see from that chart, and this only represents the Australian experience with road deaths in the last 6 years or so. We've gone well above the trend line and well above our target, which for national target in Australia is a 30% reduction on road deaths and serious injuries through till 2020. And so this is probably disappointing to see that upward trend that you can see in that chart. A bit of a breakdown on that jurisdiction by jurisdiction. You can see Australia overall with 71 fatalities up on last year. In the year-to-date progress, so just under 9%. New South Wales is generally leading the way, unfortunately, on that, with 37 more road deaths than compared to this time last year. South Australia probably helping out in terms of being 8 under, but a relatively low number overall. And if you have a look down at New Zealand, they're 10 up. So it is, as Blair sort of alluded to, it is an international trend, and certainly that's reflected here in Australia. And you know, the question that was asked at the Road Safety Conference recently is, why is this happening? And then followed up with, what can we do about it? And I'm not sure there's any definitive answer on why this is happening. I think that's something that's being explored quite actively by individual jurisdictions at the moment. And but one of the things we can identify is things such as driver fatigue, and I know a breakdown here in New South Wales shows particular crash types are leading the contribution to this increase in death toll. Things such as run-off road crashes, great involvement of light trucks And some of the reasons behind that that are being alluded to include an upturn in the economy. So as more and more people are getting jobs and the economy's taking off a little bit, we find more active transport happening, freight movements, people who journey to work, and indeed, as Blair's just experienced, going on holidays when they get that break in between work time. So there's a variety of reasons that are likely contributing to this increase in road deaths. And I think one of the things that we need to be aware of, particularly the participants in this workshop, is what contribution local government and local roads in particular might be making to that. We don't have a detailed breakdown on that yet, but I think it's fair to say that a fair proportion of this increase does involve local and regional roads, which are under the care and control of local government. And no doubt Mick Savage and Adam and Doug will have some unique perspectives on that.
Quick question for you, David.
Sure.
Sandy has asked where the WA stats are.
Yeah, I updated these this morning. These stats are pretty valid up until, for some jurisdictions as of yesterday, Tasmania only until June. When I came to Western Australia, I could not find any details, but other than they've had a total of 132 deaths this year so far. What I did find is just a very quick comparison myself, was that they are up on a month-to-month rate of crashes by around about 5%. But I didn't want to report a number in there just based on my analysis because the rest are sourced from the jurisdictions. But Western Australia is certainly also ahead of last year, unfortunately, and given their 40% reduction target, they're well above that as well, but I just don't have the numbers at hand.
Thanks, David.
Okay. Thanks, David, and segue into local government and throw it over to Mick now. Mick, if you could just a few thoughts on the challenges and the thoughts of having a strategy for road safety and some of the opportunities out there to address road safety. I'll pass it on to you now.
Thanks, Paul. The first thing I'd like to do is put the local and regional road network into perspective as a proportion of our total road network. And I've got detailed information for New South Wales. In relation to the state road network, RMS are responsible for about 18,000 kilometres of fuel pavement. They've also got about somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 kilometres of unsealed road, mainly in the unincorporated area in the west of New South Wales, giving a total of about 21,000 kilometres of road. Local government, that controls the regional and local network, is responsible for about 81,000 kilometres of sealed pavement, about 83,000 kilometres of unsealed pavement, giving a total 164,000 kilometres of pavement. Local councils are responsible for about 88.5% of the road network used under the care control of local government. I just need to think for a moment about those relative lengths. Sure, the relative traffic volumes are different on state and regional. But following on from the accident that David just quoted, last calendar year in New South Wales we had a total number of fatalities of 358, and just over between 60 and 61% of those were on the local and regional road network. That equates to about 210 of those 350 deaths on our roads. And I checked about a week ago on the BITRE website, and the number of deaths has certainly escalated so far this year. But worse still, the proportion of those I looked at increased to about 5, 6. The bottom line of all this is that local government really has an important part to play into state and federal governments are going to meet their 30% reduction over their 10-year road safety costs. The difficulty that I've discovered, and IPWEA has an annual regional forum series. One of the questions that I asked the councils I came in contact with this year, and it was about 60% of those. How many of you have a strategic road safety plan as part of your total strategic plan? The answer I got was that there were 2 councils out of that 60% that had a road safety strategy. The implication of that is that road safety is not a priority, and to some extent it's getting lost in the myriad of other activities that local government is required to look after on a day-after-day basis. So, what opportunity is I'm not sure that opportunity.
Sorry, excuse me, Mick. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Angela here from the studio. We're just I have had a few people mention that they're not able to hear you very well. I just wonder if we can just double check the microphone there.
Yep. Is that better?
Yep. Yeah. We just want to make sure there's nothing flicking on the microphone. Otherwise, we can get you in on the phone as well. But that's better now.
Yeah. Not a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
The bottom line here is that local government, state government and federal government need to work together to produce safer roads, and others will speak about some of the methods by which we might achieve that a little later in the webinar. So the opportunities that exist are for local government to become more involved in road safety and to work more closely with other levels of government to achieve better outcomes.
Okay, Mick, thanks for that oversight. You're well placed there to give us that overview. Perhaps we can drill down a little bit further into the local road debate. Perhaps, Doug, you can inform us a little bit about what's happening in Mornington and Victoria, perhaps, at local government level?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Well, similarly to the national trend, our casualty rates have stopped going down, and we're having spikes in fatalities more often than not. And we're more typical, I suppose, of municipalities. In the last 5 years, we've had 43% of our casualty crashes on local roads, and we control about 85% of the road network, with the other 15% controlled by Vic Roads, the state road authority, where they've got the freeways, highways and main roads. So we generally average about 8 fatalities per annum, and we have about 120 serious injuries on average. This year we're above the average. We're already tracking with 7 fatalities, and we've seen a sort of an interesting rise in vulnerable road users, where we've had pedestrian, cyclists and motorcyclist crashes already.
Okay, and Mornington, a lovely place of the world, you must get some seasonal pressures. Do you tend to get a bit of a spike during the seasonal period?
Yeah. As Mornington Peninsula Shire is on the metro fringe of Melbourne, and we have very attractive beaches, wineries, golf courses, and we're popular in summer, being only an hour's drive from the city. We cover an area of 700 odd kilometres squared and have about 40 towns with a population of 150,000. But we have about 5 million visitors per annum, and at the summer peak we can get up to double our traffic volumes. But interestingly, though, the crash stats aren't in proportion to that. We probably get about a 20 to 30% over that short summer holiday period increase in injury crashes, with the fatal crashes seem to stay constant. I think one of the factors there is that that keeps it more under control at that seasonal peak time is that Victoria Police have an intense activity with quite high levels of random breath testing and blitzing on speeding. But some of the crashes we see in that trend at the peak time is more about cyclists and motorcyclists, as I mentioned earlier, seem to rise also. And we get a lot more requests from the community at that summer time, and we have a proactive program in our shire to look at that. We allocate on our budget about $500,000 a year to really get out there and react promptly to that. So we've tried other things, but we've also got in the field of partnering with Vic Roads, our state road authority, to introduce Bluetooth technology to monitor congestion and track the way people travel, the types of route selection down in our popular areas. And we're hoping to demonstrate that this summer with able to send out messages via apps or variable message signs to the drivers too, to tell them which are the best alternative with the shortest trip times to avoid congestion.
Oh, that's excellent. So a lot of new things coming in, but also some long-standing things. We'll touch on the Blackspot program in a moment, but thanks for your update there for Mornington. Adam, I'm going to turn to Adam, the local operating environment in New South Wales. You're a merger council. We're very young in the life of there, but the importance and the challenges. You've got a growing network, I understand. Perhaps you can give us a few thoughts on the growing pains there and the importance of planning, etc.
Certainly, Paul. There's a number of issues, both, as you mentioned, Gosford and Wyong Council merged to become the Central Coast Council recently. Some of the challenges that are presented to us is that we've got different structures in each council, trying to merge together to form one structure. That's presenting challenges that we're currently dealing with. Another one is the resourcing of staff with the appropriate expertise in road safety. These days it's very difficult to get staff that have got appropriate expertise in road safety, and I understand that's particularly problematic for smaller councils that can't get specialist staff. So, but following on to our growing area, in the past 20 years we've had an increase of 45,000 people with an increase of 200 kilometres of new roads. And some of the challenges that lie ahead is that we're proposed to have another 85,000 people over the next 20 years, and with that they're estimating will come another 350 kilometres of new roads. So the importance of planning those new roads, making sure that they're as safe as they can be, is very high on our agenda, and we're making sure
trying to get that road safety expertise in as early as possible and getting some of those things in there. I mean, really significant numbers in terms of network length growing there, and we'll come back in a moment on if we may, Adam, about a few things on road safety auditing and so those early interventions and making sure that road safety is not a late bolt-on. So thanks for that, Adam. Some interesting news there from 1 hour sort of north of Sydney and people travelling in there. So, Rosemary, do we have any questions to pick up on so far? We've looked at a few of the issues. We're going to move on in a moment for some opportunities and initiatives, but any questions so far?
We've just got one question, which is about David's slide, setting the scene. Question for David. Just wondering if there's something in that graph that is not about road engineering. Is it about behaviour? Is it about multitasking?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. I think that's one of the things that are definitely being explored, and as I briefly mentioned, in New South Wales they have been breaking down the additional fatal and serious injury crashes that have been recorded this year in particular, to try and suss out what might be behind this increase. And certainly it's not all about the road infrastructure. There is they suspect a reasonable amount of driver behaviour behind the cause for the crashes. So, as I said, driver distraction, both in-vehicle and external. So driver distraction internal would be things such as mobile phone use. But there's no, not published anyway, there's no definitive outcomes from that. And of course, you know, if we go back to the safe system approach, local government practitioners, we need to be aware of what role the road environment has in reducing the likelihood that someone will be killed or seriously injured if they make that mistake. So if they happen to be on the phone or they're distracted by the kids in the back seat, or they're driving too fast, either intentionally or inadvertently, then we need to have a road environment that is reasonably able to reduce the severity of any crash outcome. But it's certainly a good question, and it's one that's being explored, and it was certainly one that was discussed at length at the National Road Safety Conference a couple of weeks ago. What is behind this upward trend? And as I said, it's and as Blair alluded to, it's not just a national thing, a New Zealand thing, it's a global thing as well. So they are looking at how the global economic crisis may have impacted on that downturn, and now we're on an upswing.
Awesome. Thank you for that, David. We've got another question, Paul.
Okay, yep, far away.
Comments have been made about our progress in relation to the Decade of Action targets. Based on the questions I get from traffic and road safety practitioners in relation to the Decade of Action pin I wear, it seems there isn't widespread knowledge about the decade. Given that we are now more than halfway through the decade, what are the paradigm shifts we should be applying to significantly improve the DSI results for New Zealand and Australia so that our performance is closer to that of the best performing countries? Thank you, Curtis.
Okay, Curtis. Well, I'm going to handball. I've got a couple of thoughts, obviously, but I'll handball this one straight on to Blair because I think he's exactly the right person to give you a few thoughts on this one. Sorry, Blair, if you take that one for us.
It's a great question. So, for those that aren't aware, we are in this Decade of Action, and there is a symbol of this Decade of Action, a pin that I also wear when I'm out and about as well. And I think you're right, Curtis, that there's not a great awareness that we are right in the middle of a Decade of Action, and we're halfway through and not really seeing much in terms of the flow and actions from this. So it always strikes me as odd that we've got, like I said earlier, a crisis, a global crisis, and yet the public don't understand about this, and I guess politicians don't either. So, in terms of changing the situation, I think firstly you need to recognise that there is a problem, and then secondly you need to recognise that there's something that can be done about that. And I think in both counts we're still missing the mark here, and explaining to people that this road safety crisis is one that isn't acceptable. It's above and beyond what, as road users, we should expect when we use the road. We assume we'll arrive safely when we go from point A to point B. And then secondly, the second part is that there is something that can be done about this, that we have the tools in many cases in our toolbox around what can be done to address road safety problems. And we do a lot of these things already, and a lot of them certainly we have barriers which we'll come on to around local government situations and funding and these sorts of issues, but there certainly are some solutions available which we'll come on to shortly. But my key point is we need to, I think, all of us play a role in trying to raise awareness around that this is a massive problem. It's not just a byproduct of transport, this is a crisis. And secondly, that there is something that can be done. It's not something that we should just let happen.
Awesome, thanks, Blair.
I'll just add in, I think the Sustainable Development Goals have been a big step. The United Nations for the first time really recognising transport and the role in not just economies but in safety and the growth of human society, if you like. So some real high-level commitment to that. I hope we don't just slide from the Decade of Action into reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a lot of hard work that's going to underpin that. But some of the things we'll show in a moment. Some of the small steps we can make at a local level, and progressing those is going to make a big impact. We're going to look at some of those initiatives and opportunities. First thing, though, I just want to embed the importance of data leading some of the more traditional things, the importance of that crash data to us. And I'll hand that one back to Blair, if I may, just for a second, and just to touch upon where we're sort of moving away to some extent to data in some areas. So, Blair, perhaps you could give us a few thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So we talk in road safety terms about road safety needing to be produced. It just doesn't happen by itself. So, we need to put in place ways to measure the problem and take an evidence-based approach to the solutions that we adopt. And we also need to track our performance against the targets that we set. And certainly this is a bit of a weakness we've had. We've had major headline targets at national and sometimes local level. But really, we need to also monitor what we're doing in terms of the inputs into that system. So how much enforcement, how much spend on infrastructure and these sorts of things. And this issue around producing road safety is one that we need to perhaps spend some more time on at all levels in terms of New Zealand and Australian road safety. But I guess our traditional approach has been to take the crash data, and that's typically collected by police, and use that as the basis for our analysis in terms of risk locations, but also monitoring our safety performance and progress. and we'll come on to the Blackspot approach in a moment. Some of the issues we have with this, though, are that when we look at spots on the road, particularly, these move around a lot, and we often tend to chase our tail, especially in local government. And the numbers aren't big enough, that traffic volumes aren't high enough in many cases to actually show us clear patterns in terms of crash trends. And so, if we have a crash at one location, there's every chance that would not reoccur because of low volumes for many, many years. And we've certainly done the analysis on that. And in terms of fatal crash outcomes, we know for any given fatal crash, there's quite a high chance, in fact about a 50% chance, that there's been no crash at that location in the 5 years prior. So, really these patterns aren't forming on our lower volume networks like on local and regional roads. And so at the national level, we are moving more towards route-based and mass action approaches, which we'll come on to in a moment, but also using other sources of data beyond just the crash data. Now, certainly crash data has got to remain of importance to us, but we're moving more towards understanding things like the design of the roads, the infrastructure elements, and how these individually and collectively contribute to risk. And that's certainly where we're focusing our attention now at national, state level, and we're starting also in terms of local government road safety to also look at the research on these sorts of issues and develop new tools around this knowledge that these crash patterns don't necessarily form. And so current research at national level and state level is about development of these sorts of tools, risk-based approaches, systemic approaches where we know on certain classes of road we tend to have certain types of crashes, and then also we know the solutions. And really in a proactive way, we put in place the infrastructure solutions to address those sorts of problems. So I think we'll see more of those tools developed, particularly for local government into the near future.
Okay, and that's going to bring with it challenges for local government associations, and Queensland have been very active with net risk and various things, that, as people may know, and WA as well with the government association there. So importantly through that, but of course with the new things that we're looking at and some of the new things under the new paradigm, we've got to, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are still a number of things. The Blackspot program's been particularly important to us, and perhaps Mick, you could have a few thoughts on the Blackspot program and how you see it developing within the next few years perhaps.
Thanks, Paul. I have a view that the Blackspot program is actually an admission of our failure, that if we were doing good design and good road management, we wouldn't have the deaths that we're having. Having said that, I think that given that we're having we're having accidents, a large number of accidents on our local and regional road network, the Blackspot program is a really important element to look at those locations and do what we can to prevent further occurrences. Following on from that, I think that we should be embracing road safety auditing to a larger extent in our design process. The history of local roads is largely one of following bullet tracks. Lots of kilometres of local road have never been designed to the standards that we would design them to now in a greenfield situation. And we should be looking at what we can do to improve the geometry of our network to provide us a safer environment. So all those things, all that information should come out of our review of the Blackspot data, and it should focus us on the areas where we can get best outcomes in the short term.
Okay, thanks, Mick. And David, be true to say, though, we have had some good success from the Blackspot program. Do you have anything in terms of the benefits there, or indeed the limitations of the program? What are your thoughts? Where can we go with the Blackspot program to improve?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, the Blackspot program, I think, has served us well over quite a few years, 20-odd years plus. And as Blair alluded to, increasingly where serious and fatal road crashes are occurring, they're becoming one-off events. There hasn't been a crash history there. So even though we've had studies in the past to show a really high rate of return, a high benefit cost ratio achieved from the Blackspot program, that's diminishing. And I think people who have been involved in, particularly from local government seeking funding from the Blackspot program would appreciate the benchmark for qualifying for Blackspot funding has progressively been lowered over the years, and that's because we are addressing the high cluster of serious injury and fatal crash locations. So they're becoming more randomly dispersed, they're becoming one-off, and our network's growing as well. So I think there's a balance that needs to be taken up by people who fund the Blackspot, the federal government, the state Blackspot programs, and local government who are taking advantage of the funding that's available. It's important to keep it going. The community will see deaths and serious injury on the roads and they will want those sites treated. But I think as practitioners, one thing we need to think about is how we can more effectively allocate funding to improving the road network. And again, as Blair mentioned, a risk-based approach and mass action route-based programs are probably going to be more cost-effective on our road network than just going around treating individual locations. Consistency in the road is probably a very effective measure for improving road safety. If a driver along a road understands the risk they're facing on that road, they will make their own judgment and modify their behaviour accordingly. It's the ones that get caught out unawares that is likely to become the problem of the future. So if we can do route-based action programs and make the whole route a better, safer, more predictable road environment, then I think we'll find that we achieve the same outcome, and that is a reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes.
Okay, well, thanks, David. We'll come back to that thought a little bit later. We'll tune into where that's been done on a local, very local level, and Doug's working in Mornington. So we'll come back a little bit there. We touched upon the Towards Zero and the Safe System or Vision Zero developments and the paradigm shift there. We're not going to dwell on that too much. I'm sure everyone's seen diagrams like this or are very similar, and the 5 pillars, including the post-crash trauma. We won't go into that in too much detail here, but what I want to do is to touch upon that safe system as where we're going with that in terms of tools and guidance that's out there. We have a few thoughts that is it reaching local government effectively? We'll see some examples where it is, but also in a moment where there may be some issues. But Blair, I just want to touch upon that safe system, what Off-Roads guidance is out there, and perhaps some tools.
Yeah, sure. So for those that don't know, we've had the safe system approach now as our guiding principle in Australia for, it's about 12 years already, and I think there's still a fair few people not really aware of what it's all about. I think most that have heard about it will understand the end vision, which is ultimately would like to eliminate death and serious injury on our roads, and that's a big objective. It's a huge task for us to get there, and I think that's actually been a bit of a barrier for us to some extent, that we've seen this big end goal but not really had the steps in terms of how to reach that goal. And so I think a lot of the work we've done in the last 4 or 5 years is recognise that and try to break this problem down into really manageable bite-sized chunks. And if you've got this huge goal that seems unattainable, you're not going to really start on that pathway. So I think this is a really valuable way for us to move forward here, is just to really set in place the actions, in a stepwise fashion. This is what we need to do to reach that eventual goal. And, in terms of eliminating death and serious injury, we'll have improved vehicle technologies, self-driving vehicles and all the safety systems coming on stream in the next decade. They'll greatly assist us. We'll have better ways to monitor and control driver behaviour, speeding, drink driving, fatigue even. So all these things are going to happen, and they'll certainly contribute to these safe system outcomes. But certainly the other issues around speed and infrastructure are important. So all of these things acting together will, I think, ultimately get us towards this target. But it's still, quite some years off. So what we've done in the meantime is produce some tools, mainly through Off-Roads, but also through some state government projects, really just to break the tasks down, to identify at a project level or an initiative level what is the problem, how close are we in terms of safe system outcomes. And they break this issue down into the key crash types that do result in fatal and serious outcomes, and the key risk types as well in terms of exposure, likelihood and severity. And so we've released just recently a safe system assessment framework through Austroads, and that's available from their website. Certainly David's done a lot of work in this area in terms of local government guidance around the safe system approach, and again some of the solutions that might be applied to address road safety on local government roads. I think the key point here is, though, just making sure that we don't see this end goal, but we break it down into small bite-sized chunks. And back to that data issue, that we need that crash data, but also this other data around road design elements and various other sources of information to help monitor how we're progressing, what are our inputs, and how are each of those working in terms of the outcomes. The other thing that's happening right now around Australia and New Zealand is a series of workshops on the safe system approach, funded by Austroads, to really talk through some of these tools that are now available, talk through some of the solutions, and get some detail around what we really mean by this safe system. In terms of timeframes, yeah, certainly a need to act now. As we saw, we're seeing this massive kick up in terms of the number of deaths on our roads. Similarly, serious injury, the same. That's probably, for many reasons, driven by exposure, increases in volumes of pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, and other vehicle types. But we need to do something, very soon, in fact, immediately, to arrest that problem.
Thanks, Blair. But one of the things that always hits me, we're putting a lot of store in vehicle technology, but let's not forget the fact that the road needs to be in such a condition, and providing that information to these driverless or autonomous vehicles that are going to be using our network. A really significant point. We need to, certainly not time for us to put the queue in the rack and think that it's going to solve all our problems. We need to make sure we have the road markings and road starts, etc., all these things in place which are going to help these vehicles to operate. Adam, I'll come back to you. Embedding some of this safe system thinking, breaking down perhaps the low reliance on standards and specifications when we're designing some of our new roads. Do you have any thoughts on that, and how do we get into the process early enough to really make a difference?
Yes, thanks, Paul. Far too often I have discussions with designers that think if I design in accordance with the guides, I'm going to have a safe outcome. But design guides have limitations. They can't consider all the aspects of a road environment together at the same time, and this is where we need to apply the safe systems approach, with maybe auditing the design after it's done, just to increase the safety performance of that project. And that's why we try and get the safety side of things embedded into the planning of a project as early as possible.
Is that always easy, or is that an issue?
It is difficult. I work with the planners here in the Central Coast Council, and we've been lucky enough to involve our strategic and town planners to include safe systems requirements in our planning controls. This is a great example. The slide on the left-hand side of your screen was submitted as part of a rezoning proposal at the first stage of the thought of developing a parcel of land. As you can see, there are quite a few cross streets, long lengths of streets, and there's also a significant landfall from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. We advise the developer that there are a number of issues with that road layout, and we included some of the requirements in the planning controls that were developed as a result of that. And the screen on the layout on the right is what was submitted with the DA application after they'd gone through a review of their road layout and considered our comments and the planning controls regarding a safe road layout, and we had a far superior outcome. And through the DA application process now, we'll be imposing requirements to carry out detailed design audits on a far superior road layout.
So it's all about that functionality of the road and making sure the road we provide is appropriate for the traffic intending to use it. Is that the key message, I guess?
And reduce risks. Each cross intersection's got numerous conflict points. We've eliminated significant number of cross streets, which will reduce a significant number of potential vehicle conflict points. We've reduced the number of long street leg lengths, which will reduce the potential for higher speeds. So we've reduced a lot of potential safety issues on that whole road layout.
And you mentioned road safety auditing, getting it into the process as early as possible, that conceptual design as we see here, but also in the preliminary design phases before it's too late and things are built?
That's correct, Paul. Yeah, we get them done. There's no use spending money on them, having audits done at pre-opening. We want them done up front too, because that way you get better bang for your buck. So we get these audits done, and it adds a lot of value to the project.
And you have the facility, you have enough auditors to make this possible, or you find a way?
There are a number of auditors out there. I get a bit disappointed sometimes with the quality of the audits that are presented. A lot of auditors seem to focus more on the design aspects and do a design report rather than a road safety audit, picking up on the safety aspects or the crash potential. I'll give you an example. I had an audit presented on a project that had a median that they said wasn't adequately wide enough to harbour a pedestrian, but they failed to look at the median was in the centre of a 6-lane road.
Okay, so it's just that road network as a whole, looking at the holistic view on the road and how it's going to operate, where we have the vulnerable road users. So some valuable messages there, Adam. Thank you for those. Want to move on to Doug, and one of the things they're very proud of is their towards zero, or being a towards zero municipality. And Doug, can you tell us a bit more about that, please? It sounds an interesting initiative there.
Yeah, well, just to put it in perspective first, we've had a very strong commitment to what Blair and Nick and David were talking about, the strong Blackspot program over many years. But as I mentioned earlier, our crash stats have plateaued off and are coming more regularly and more alarmingly. So we were responding to significant community concerns about the level of road trauma, and it's been in the media a lot here locally with local press, but we also were being proactive, so we wanted to continue on that approach. So what we took on board was to align ourselves strongly with the new state road safety strategy, which is spearheaded by our Transport Accident Commission, TAC's Towards Zero campaign. And in April this year, the Shire councillors resolved that the Mornington Shire be a Towards Zero municipality, and that set the scene for us to be now really proactive and take on board what that drives the Towards Zero municipality is the safe system approach. And we've, as you can see on the screen now, already had an interest in and strong programs in lowering speed limits, but we have had a Peninsula Safer Speed program where we've reduced some of the rural roads down to 80 kilometres now from default 100, and we want to be able to do more of that sort of thing on a proactive way and use the latest tools that Blair was mentioning about earlier. We've evolved from NetRisk. We're using the latest Australian National Risk Assessment model that will support those sort of initiatives. It's a risk assessment of our roads. But we also have set up this program to demonstrate, and being a first municipality in Victoria to adopt to be a Towards Zero municipality, the TAC is supporting us strongly. We want to demonstrate through some initial projects the safe system solutions, and you can see there on the slide one of the ones we're developing at the moment is for cyclists, and that's a photo of a landscape architect's impression of a separated cycle lanes, a two-way on a busy coastal road where we've got no on-road cycle facilities at the moment because it's through a commercial area, and we want to be able to provide a safe system solution. So we're talking with those key state agencies to get that sort of developed, and that's quite an exciting project to look at vulnerable road users and get some sort of actions happening in that arena. Yeah.
Another example there of a race crossing or a speed platform. Can you tell us a little bit about the site here?
Well, this is in one of our popular seaside towns of Sorrento, where this has been put in a little while back, but it's an example of the type of safe system solution, a raised platform intersection treatment. It's hard to see there, but on the left it is another leg to the intersection, and it has incorporated pedestrian facilities also. So that's trying more novel approaches to have more cost-effective rather than more expensive roundabouts or signalisation when it's not warranted. So we're looking at those sort of things. But I suppose moving on to another slide there, this is how we developed up the whole idea from workshops, and we wanted to have a clear vision. And what's the real strength of this initiative is really the involvement and strong support from the key state road agencies, that being Vic Roads, Victoria Police, and the Transport Accident Commission, TAC. So that's really the uniqueness in harnessing that and focusing in our shire to see what we can really get some good demonstration projects up and really display the safe system approach. And we want to do it across not just from road infrastructure point of view. We want to look at speed limits, like I mentioned earlier, and also behavioural programs. We're targeting one rural town where we want to get the community to be aware of the safe system approach and get Victoria Police more exposed there and explaining the issues of and getting community ownership of the problem. And that's what local governments are good. They're right at that coalface. They can talk to the people. We have good network of contacts with community groups and sporting groups. And we want to be able to also look at examples on some of our more problematic roads like freeways and high-speed rural roads. So we're partnering with Vic Roads to look at things that we can do there too. So we are exploring vehicle technology, and we've got some ideas there too, but maybe that's for another time.
Doug, that's excellent. Obviously been very busy there and some fresh ideas, so thank you for sharing a few of those with us. Some of the issues that we do hear about with the safe system and getting it out there, perhaps Mick, you've got some thoughts on raising the awareness, getting the local government more attuned with the safe system. How do we go about that? And we had some very encouraging things from Doug there, but what about around the country? How do we grow the safe system approach?
I think we've just got to be consistent in pushing the message, and the sort of things that Doug's done and the results, hopefully the road safety results that will come out of that, could form a very useful case study for distribution around the rest of Australia. I think it's really important. I think, as I said earlier, I think local government has its hands full with a whole range of things. But if it can see programs that might be funded or that might result in reduced costs, better community services, that's a real driver to get the community involved. It can't just be imposed. That's not going to work. It needs the approach that Doug's just been through, engagement with the community and support by all road users. And we as an industry, local government across Australia, need to keep pushing the message and providing information and support if it's going to happen as a national activity.
Okay, that's some great points there, and I personally am a firm believer in those tangible, really, those demonstration projects. Adam, you had an additional thought perhaps on some Austroads guide on planning and various things in the safe system field. Do you want to share that with people, please?
Yes, yeah, I'd try and, I suppose, get council or delivered across council, such as a tool like the road safety officers do, try and promote it through our design groups, our asset groups, our maintenance people, that we've got to promote road safety throughout the council as a whole, not just as individual small groups.
You mentioned a specific Austroads guide that's helped recently.
Yes, I recently saw that Australians have got a new guide out, Traffic Impacts on Development. It's got a very strong focus on early intervention at the strategic planning stage, similar to what we've been doing here with some of our new developments. There's also the road safety focus throughout the development stages too, the detailed designs and the ongoing requirements. I've yet to sort of read the whole document, but it appears to be very well focused on early intervention.
Excellent. Okay, so some great thoughts there from Doug, Mick and Adam. But let's see, Rosie, if we've got any questions coming in before.
Yes, we've got quite a few questions. We might not have time for all of them, but thank you to the people who've sent them in. The question is towards zero decade of action target just an idealistic goal without significant funding investments in all areas of the road safety task? The minor increases in budget, e.g. Blackspot, Safer Roads programs, only scratch the surface of what is a mammoth task. David.
Thanks, Rosemary. I was half expecting that to go to Blair, but I had a thought that I think one of the things we just need to be aware of is that it's not minor increases in Blackspot funding that has been happening in the last few years from the federal government. They've put in hundreds of millions of dollars. I think what we need to do, though, is obviously make sure that it's correctly targeted, and as we touched on earlier, start looking outside a Blackspot response, although I think that's always going to be part of the mix. Going to the first part of that question, I think the Decade of Action target, the Vision Zero target, those sorts of things are largely aspirational. I think in all practicality, it's going to be extremely difficult and long term before we can truly say that we aren't having people killed or seriously injured on our road network. And I think Blair may have touched on that sort of concept earlier. But it's an important aspiration to have. If we adopt anything less than that, then what we're truly saying is we accept that people are going to get killed. Not that it will happen, but we accept that it will happen. So I think it's important that Decade of Action, Vision Zero, Safe System Towards Zero, all that sort of thing, aspirational objectives and targets that we have, but not only are they aspirational, but we seriously strive to achieve them as well, regardless of how difficult that may be. And local government has an important element to play in that.
Awesome.
I think one of the points we had from the workshops, the Austroads workshops, is that we can form very achievable and very significant key performance indicators based on the safe system. So they don't need to be getting towards that end game necessarily, but they can chart the way ahead, and that's one thing we worked on, particularly one of the workshops very well, and came up with a good suite of indicators which people were really aligned with.
That's right.
And can be done.
That's right, and out of that workshop too, Paul, one of the other concepts, and I think Blair touched on it as well, you need to just break down the problem within your LGA and maybe start targeting things. It may be your first objective is, how do we stop people getting killed in this town centre, or how do we stop them getting killed on this particular route or intersection? And once you start looking at it that way, you can build some momentum, and you might then spread it across the LGA.
Okay. Blair, do you want to add anything at this stage?
No, I'll just agree with those comments, and perhaps we'll save some time for another quick question.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary.
Yep, and just to remind our audience that we were due to finish at 3 p.m, but we might just go over a couple of minutes. If you have to go to a meeting or something, then you will receive the recording of the webinar. Another question from Curtis. Blair noted that we have the tools available to improve road safety, but we still have major issues on our road networks based on the near total lack of understanding about the safe system approach I encountered in the UK, which is one of the best performing countries in the world. It seems the safe system is not the only answer. Do you have a good understanding of the key differences in organisational approach between the best performing countries and Australasia? If so, what are those differences? If not, what are we doing to understand those differences and align Australasian practice with that of the best performing countries?
Paul, I'm happy to take that question if you like.
Yeah, I think. Yep,
I think it's a fantastic question, and certainly there's a lot of value in comparing our own performance internationally. And we do refer to the southern countries, Sweden, the UK, and the Netherlands, and they're consistently at the top of the table for good safety performance. And we do look at them, and there are a lot of studies done around how they manage road safety. And it's interesting to note that there's a lot of differences in how they manage things, but also a lot of similarities. And I also worked in the UK for about 5 years, and I returned recently just this year again, and note that they have now adopted the safe system approach. But one of the discussions I had while I was there was that a lot of what they were doing was very consistent with the safe system thinking anyway, that in terms of the need for infrastructure that provides a forgiving road environment and roadside environment, they already have an M-class road network that's taking a lot of their traffic volumes. So a good functional classification of the road network, which again is part of what we promote in terms of the safe system approach, and a really good starting point in terms of improving safety. So look, I think we're still trying to learn from the experiences from the likes of the UK and particularly Sweden and the Netherlands. We would like to do more benchmarking against what we do here and what they do. What other issues that we can learn from them. And there's a lot of projects that we do tap into the work being done in those countries, and even in countries that perhaps don't perform so well, where we can still pick up lessons from them. And a lot of the work we do now focuses on picking on good practice ideas from around the world, in terms of whether that be infrastructure or behavioural-based initiatives. And we are learning and we are picking up new approaches all the time. But I think it's fair to say that in many cases we've got already the solutions in front of us. The exception to that perhaps is at intersections, and we do still struggle for local government roads, obviously, in terms of our funding of what would be required in terms of protective road infrastructure. But, activities like what Doug's described from Mornington, we do have some solutions emerging, and they've been evaluated and been seen to be very effective. So a great point. I think we need to be watching more and more what has been done elsewhere. But then the next step after that is how do we actually get that information across to those working in Australia and New Zealand, because everyone is very time poor, particularly in local government. There's limited resources. There's often not a specialist in road safety. So perhaps part of our solution here is just trying to find ways to better get this information across to local government and those who need the information most.
I agree, Blair, and a number of the Austroads guides are coming out in that compendium type format these days, giving people options and lots of information about challenges and where things have gone well and what the issues are. I also like certain things being in certain areas of the world where perhaps their road safety performance isn't the best overall, but we can learn from things like segregated motorcycle lanes and cycle lanes, which are happening in certain parts of the world, and those sort of things. Rosemary, what I think we're probably going to have to do, we've got everybody's email addresses. I think if we store all the questions, and we'll make a firm undertaking to provide responses to those questions and publish them to everybody. Is that okay before we move on to a few final points?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Apologise to everyone. I'm sure there are a number of questions coming in there, so thank you for those. They won't be forgotten. We will make sure we provide some email responses to those. I'm just conscious of people having committed their hour and a few closing remarks. So if we can just go around the table, perhaps we could start with Mick. Perhaps a challenge you can set for some of our local government practitioners, or perhaps a closing message from you on today's sort of thoughts.
Just a couple of quick things. Firstly, the funding available to local government for maintenance of its road network is well short of the absolute minimum required, so that our network is continuing to decrease in quality. We need to address that if we're going to improve the overall performance, asset performance, and safety of our network. So looking at a different or a better funding model is critical in my view to getting improved results in the road safety area.
Okay. Thanks for those thoughts, Mick, and thank you for your contribution today. It's been very much appreciated. Doug, any closing message? You've been very active there. Any thoughts from you to close us down?
A couple there quickly. Paul was taking on what Mick said. We should utilise tools like the Australian National Risk Assessment Model in funding assessments now, moving from just pure crash data, using a risk-based model for, say, allocating federal Blackspot funding. That should be pushed solidly through the right agencies. But But just back on my our Towards Zero municipality initiative, that's the strong vision of the Shire to be the safest municipality in Australia. So I put the challenge out there to all other municipalities to be safer too, and to join with us and collaborate with us, or any other organisations, and come on the journey with us. And this exciting new era to be involved in.
Doug, that's a fantastic invitation. Thank you for that. Adam, on to you. Perhaps a couple of closing remarks from yourself.
Yes, one is to promote road safety across the board in local government. Road safety can be applied at numerous avenues in there: fleet, asset management, development, design, road safety officers, right across the board. To accept it and embrace it, we need to apply it through all these areas, and that can be done very easily at design stages. It doesn't cost anything, and get a better outcome for all.
Adam, thank you for those wise words. Blair, you have a couple of things for us?
Yeah, look, just agreeing with those statements, and also restating the earlier point about the need to get in early. You know, the earlier we make a change here and build safety in, the easier it is to apply, and particularly that planning stage. I think we've got a great opportunity from local government to get in here and make sure our designs from the outset are going to be safe. And there's certainly growing guidance around this. In fact, I think there's a webinar coming up quite soon on a new guide from Austroads around safety and planning. So keep your eyes open for that, because I think this is really a key for how local government can contribute to addressing this problem.
Okay, well, my closing point is to bolt on one more thing to that, and please don't be afraid to innovate, as Doug's shown a number of things there. We mustn't be afraid of innovation. There are some pressures or some risks people think with innovation, but they're often unfounded, and as long as we document what we're doing, we have a good rationale. And we also monitor and evaluate what success we got. Has the innovation worked? But we certainly shouldn't be afraid to innovate. I think it's really important that we do that. Final thoughts I'm going to provide to David. I know David's got a bit of a challenge with his background in local government. So, David, you close us down?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. I think it's a personal challenge for everyone who's attending. You've shown your interest and commitment to road safety. I think if you can understand what you can contribute in your local government area with your council organisation and your community, that's a challenge that I'd give everyone out of today's webinar. There are tools out there, Austroads, and organisations such as ARB. There are colleagues, Adam, Doug and Mick are just at the tip of the iceberg of local government practitioners out there who can provide some advice. So have a look at how you individually can make a difference in your council in road safety, and I think if we all tried that, then we would definitely be having some good inroads into local government road safety.
David, thank you very much. Rosie.
And Paul, thank you so much for facilitating this awesome discussion. We'd like to thank our panel who have joined us from their very many different workplaces or home offices, and we'd like to thank our audience. We'd love to hear your feedback via the survey that we'll launch shortly, and we hope you'll join us again for future webinars. Don't forget that if you enjoyed today's experience, please visit our website to find out what more is available.